For 5 years, Lyra Thorne had worn her Omega status like a cloak of invisibility, a necessary disguise that hid the ancient power flowing through her veins. As Luna to Alpha Kale Silverstone, she had swallowed her true nature, believing that love would be enough, that patience would eventually bear the fruit of an heir. But some sacrifices hollow you from within, until nothing remains but the shell of who you once were. On the night the blood moon painted the sky crimson, Lyra stood alone before her pack, quill in hand, the divorce parchment awaiting her signature. With each stroke of her name, written in ash and blood, she felt the mate bond shatter, a pain so exquisite it bordered on liberation. Discarded for a human who could give Kale what she apparently could not, Lyra walked away from everything she had known, the whispers of barren and worthless following her into exile. What the pack didn't know, what Kale had forgotten in his ambition, was that the quietest wolves often carry the oldest songs. And beneath Lyra's submission beat the heart of the Crimson Fang legacy, a bloodline of female alphas who had once ruled these territories with both ferocity and compassion, a power dormant but never truly gone. As the next full moon approaches, Lyra's golden eyes begin to gleam with ancestral memory. The protection spell cast by her grandmother unravels with each passing day, revealing not the forsaken Omega they had cast aside, but the heir to a throne that has awaited her return. In a world where power is measured by dominance, Lyra must decide what kind of alpha she will become, one who rules through vengeance for past wounds, or one who leads through mercy despite them. For when darkness threatens everything she once loved, the true strength of an alpha lies not in who submits to her, but in what she is willing to fight to protect. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The night air carried the scent of autumn's death and winter's promise, as Lyra Thorne stood beneath the crimson glow of the blood moon, her bare feet pressed against the cold earth of the clearing, where, 5 years earlier, she had pledged herself to Kale Silverstone, alpha of the Moonstone Pack. Tonight, that same earth would witness their severance. The blood moon waits for no one, Omega. The title, once whispered with reverence when she'd been Luna, now dripped with contempt from Elder Grayson's lips. Sign the parchment and be gone from these lands before dawn. Lyra's fingers tightened around the quill, its weight heavier than the stone that had settled in her chest when she'd first discovered Kale's betrayal. The divorce document lay on the ancient oak table, illuminated by torchlight and the moon's bloody gaze. Where is he? Her voice emerged steadier than she'd expected. If Kale wishes to cast me aside, he should have the courage to look me in the eyes while doing so. Elder Grayson's weathered face remained impassive. The Alpha has more pressing matters than watching an Omega weep over what was never truly hers. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathered pack members. 50 wolves who had once bowed to her as their Luna. Now, they watched with a mixture of pity and satisfaction as the once powerful mate of their Alpha was reduced to the lowest rank. More pressing matters, Lyra repeated softly, her gaze drifting toward the pack house where Kale's new chosen waited. Samantha Palmer, human, beautiful, pregnant. The thought sent a fresh wave of pain through Lyra's chest, the wolf inside her whimpering. 5 years of trying to conceive, of monthly disappointments and whispers about her barrenness, and Kale had managed to impregnate a human woman within months of their affair. He promised me forever, Lyra whispered, not to Elder Grayson, but to the moon above. He swore by your light that our bond was unbreakable. And yet, came a voice from behind her, deep and all too familiar. Here we are. Lyra turned, her heart both rising and falling at the sight of him. Kale Silverstone stood tall in the moonlight, his dark hair swept back, silver eyes gleaming with the power of his wolf. She had once traced the sharp line of his jaw with her fingertips, had once pressed her lips against the scar that ran from his temple to his cheek, a reminder of the challenge he'd won to become Alpha. You said you'd be too busy to attend, Elder Grayson stated, clearly surprised by the Alpha's presence. Kale's gaze never left Lyra's face. I changed my mind. Some endings deserve to be witnessed. The words cut deeper than any claw. Lyra straightened her spine, refusing to crumble before him. Is that what I am to you now, Kale? An ending? Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or merely annoyance. You know the laws, Lyra. An Alpha needs an heir, and I couldn't give you one. The admission burned her throat. So you found someone who could. It's not personal, he said, but the lie hung between them like poison. It's for the pack. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Nothing is more personal than breaking a mate bond, Kale. Nothing. The gathered wolves shifted uncomfortably. Breaking a mate bond was considered sacred and final, especially under a blood moon. Such divorces were rare and painful, physically and spiritually. Sign the document, Kale commanded, his alpha voice resonating with power. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Lyra felt the compulsion of his command, but it washed over her strangely, like water over stone, rather than the usual crushing weight. Something had changed within her, something the elders had missed. She was no ordinary Omega. As you wish, Alpha. She dipped the quill into the small bowl of mixed ash and blood. Her blood, taken earlier by Elder Grayson for the ritual. The black-red mixture glistened in the moonlight as she brought the quill to the parchment. But before signing, she looked up at Kale one last time. Do you remember what my grandmother told you the day we mated? That my bloodline carries secrets older than your pack's founding. Kale frowned. Your grandmother was a senile old woman who claimed to be descended from the first wolves. Fairy tales and nothing more. Lyra smiled then, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. Perhaps, but fairy tales often contain warnings, don't they? With that, she signed her name with swift, deliberate strokes. The moment the quill left the parchment, a sharp pain lanced through her chest, radiating outward as the mate bond began to dissolve. Gasping, she clutched at her heart, feeling as though molten silver coursed through her veins. Across from her, Kale doubled over, experiencing the same severance. Their eyes met through the haze of agony, and for one brief moment, Lyra thought she saw genuine loss in his gaze. Then it was done. The bond, once a warm presence within her soul, vanished like mist in sunlight. The absence left her hollow, but also lighter, freer than she'd felt in years. Elder Grayson rolled up the parchment, his expression solemn. By the witness of the blood moon and the pack, your union is dissolved. Lyra Thorne, you are released from the Moonstone Pack. You have until dawn to gather your belongings and leave our territory. Lyra nodded, her hand still pressed against her chest where the pain lingered. I understand. She turned to leave but paused beside Kale. Without looking at him, she whispered, the next full moon will rise in 28 days. Remember my words then. As she walked away, the pack parted before her. No longer her family, no longer her responsibility. Some averted their eyes, unable to witness her fall from grace. Others watched with undisguised relief or malice. Only a few, like Maya, once her closest friend, showed genuine sorrow. Lyra, Maya called softly as she passed. Where will you go? Lyra paused, glancing back at the pack and the man who had discarded her. To claim what was always mine, she answered cryptically. My grandmother's legacy awaits. That night, as Lyra packed the few belongings that truly mattered, her grandmother's journals, a lock of her mother's hair, the silver pendant that had been passed down through generations of her maternal line, she felt something stirring within her. Her wolf, long subdued and submissive as befitted an Omega, paced restlessly beneath her skin. Soon, she promised her other half, soon we will be whole again. From the small cottage that had been her home since Kale had moved Samantha into the Alpha's quarters, Lyra could see the pack house on the hill. Lights still burned in the windows despite the late hour. The divorce ritual had left its mark on everyone, it seemed. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, she found Maya standing there, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. You shouldn't be here, Lyra said, glancing past her friend to ensure no one had followed. Kale wouldn't approve. I don't care what he approves anymore, Maya replied fiercely. What he's done to you is wrong, Lyra. The pack knows it, even if they're too afraid to say it. Lyra pulled her friend inside and closed the door. It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. Maya grabbed her hands. But where will you go? What will you do? An Omega without a pack. I won't be an Omega for long, Lyra said, the words emerging with surprising certainty. Maya's eyes widened. What do you mean? Lyra moved to her grandmother's trunk, lifting the lid to reveal the ancient journals and scrolls within. My grandmother wasn't telling fairy tales, Maya. The Crimson Fang legacy is real. I am the last descendant of Arya, the first alpha female. My bloodline was suppressed, hidden for generations to protect us from those who feared female alphas. But how? You've always been an Omega. We all sensed it, Lyra pulled out a journal bound in faded red leather. A protection spell, cast by my grandmother when I was born. She knew the old ways would be threatened if I came into my power too soon. The spell suppressed my true nature until I needed it most. She touched her chest where the mate bond had been. Or until I was free to claim it. Lyra, this is... Maya shook her head in disbelief. If this is true, Kale has made a terrible mistake. Yes, Lyra agreed, her eyes flashing with a glimmer of gold. Not the submissive brown of an Omega, but the fierce amber of an Alpha. He has. As dawn approached, Lyra stood at the edge of Moonstone territory with her meager possessions. Maya had said her goodbyes an hour earlier, promising to watch for Lyra's return. Behind her lay 5 years of love, betrayal, and submission. Before her stretched the dark forest that separated Moonstone lands from the ancestral home of her grandmother, a place known as Crimson Valley, abandoned for generations, but still holding the secrets of her lineage. Lyra took one last look at the pack house in the distance. Somewhere within those walls, Kale slept beside his human mate, believing he had rid himself of an inconvenient, barren wife. 28 days, she whispered to the fading moon. In 28 days, I return not as the Omega you discarded, but as the Alpha I was born to be. With those words, Lyra Thorne stepped across the boundary and into the wilderness, leaving behind the only pack she had ever known. The wolf within her raised its head and howled, not in sorrow, but in anticipation of the power that awaited them both. The blood moon had witnessed her divorce. The next full moon would witness her rebirth. The journey to Crimson Valley took 7 days of relentless travel through dense forest and rocky terrain. With each passing day, Lyra felt changes rippling through her body, muscles strengthening, senses sharpening, her wolf growing more restless beneath her skin. The protection spell was unraveling, thread by ancient thread. On the 8th day, as the afternoon sun filtered through autumn leaves, Lyra crested a hill and gazed down at a valley bathed in golden light. Nestled within stood the ruins of what had once been a thriving wolf settlement. Stone buildings with collapsed roofs, a circular gathering space at the center, and at the far end, partially reclaimed by nature, a structure larger than the rest. The Alpha's house. Grandmother, Lyra whispered, I've come home. As if in response, a warm breeze swept through the valley, carrying the scents of wild roses and sage, her grandmother's favorite herbs. Lyra closed her eyes and breathed deeply, allowing memories to surface. Summer visits as a child, her grandmother's gnarled hands gently braiding her hair while telling stories of fierce female alphas who had once ruled these lands. The Crimson Fang women weren't just alphas, her grandmother had said. They were queens, healers, warriors. They led with both strength and compassion, a balance male alphas often struggle to achieve. With renewed purpose, Lyra descended into the valley. The settlement had been abandoned over 50 years ago when her grandmother, the last recognized alpha of the Crimson Fang pack, had died without an apparent heir. The remaining pack members had scattered, joining other territories or living as lone wolves, believing their lineage had ended. None had known about Lyra's mother, hidden away and raised among humans, or about Lyra herself, the last carrier of the crimson blood. The Alpha house stood partially intact, its stone walls weathered but strong. Vines climbed the exterior, and part of the roof had collapsed, but it remained recognizable as the seat of power it once was. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, Lyra entered what had been her grandmother's home. Dust motes danced in shafts of light that penetrated through holes in the roof. Animal tracks marked the floor. Smaller creatures had claimed this space in the absence of wolves. Yet despite the years of abandonment, Lyra could still detect traces of her grandmother's scent lingering in the stone itself. 20 days until the full moon, she said aloud, her voice echoing in the empty hall. 20 days to reclaim what was lost. That night, Lyra slept in her grandmother's chamber, wrapped in furs she had brought and surrounded by the journals she had rescued from Moonstone Pack. As moonlight spilled through the broken roof, she dreamed of running through forests with a pack that followed her lead, of standing proud on a cliff edge with the wind in her fur, of facing Kale as an equal. No, as his superior. She woke at dawn with purpose burning in her veins. The first task was to make the Alpha house habitable again. The second was to study her grandmother's teachings on the awakening ritual that would fully release her alpha nature on the night of the full moon. For 5 days, Lyra worked tirelessly. She cleared debris, patched the roof with branches and leaves, hunted for food, and established her territory by marking the boundaries of the valley. Each night, exhausted but determined, she read from her grandmother's journals by firelight, absorbing centuries of knowledge that had been preserved for this very moment. On the 6th day, as Lyra returned from hunting with a freshly caught rabbit, she sensed a presence in her territory. Dropping her prey, she crouched defensively, her wolf rising close to the surface, ready to protect what was hers. "I mean no harm," came a familiar voice as Maya stepped from the trees, hands raised in a gesture of peace. Lyra straightened, shock and joy warring within her. "Maya, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" Maya approached cautiously, respect in her posture. Even without completing the awakening ritual, Lyra's presence had changed, commanding deference. "I followed your scent. It's different now. Stronger." The two women embraced, Lyra inhaling the comforting scent of pack and home. "You shouldn't have come. If Kyle discovers—" "Kale has bigger problems," Maya interrupted, pulling back to meet Lyra's gaze. "The human, Samantha. Something's wrong with the pregnancy. The pack healer can't explain it, but the child grows too quickly, and it's draining her life force." A chill ran through Lyra. "And Kyle? He's frantic. He's called for healers from 3 neighboring packs." Maya hesitated before adding, "There are whispers, Lyra. Whispers that this is punishment from the moon goddess for breaking a true mate bond." Lyra retrieved her rabbit, gesturing for Maya to follow her back to the Alpha House. "And what do you believe, Maya?" "I believe there are forces at work beyond Kale's understanding." Maya gazed around at the settlement as they walked. "This place, I can feel its power." "The stories about your grandmother, they weren't just stories, were they?" Inside the Alpha House, Lyra prepared the rabbit for cooking while Maya explored the main hall with wide eyes. "No," Lyra finally answered. "They weren't just stories. The Crimson Fang women have carried the blood of the first wolves for generations. We were alphas before the concept of pack hierarchy even existed. Then why did you hide it? Why live as an omega?" Lyra tossed herbs into the pot. "I didn't know the truth until my grandmother's final visit, just before she died. I was 16, already promised to Kale through an arrangement between packs. She told me about my heritage, but warned that revealing it then would put me in danger. Too many male alphas feared the return of female leadership." She stirred the bubbling stew, remembering. The protection spell she cast altered how others perceived me, as an omega with unusually strong healing abilities, perfect as a Luna, but never a threat to male power. I was to wait until the right time to break the spell and claim my birthright. "And now is that time?" Maya asked, settling beside the fire. Lyra nodded. "The divorce under the blood moon began the unraveling. The full moon will complete it." They ate in contemplative silence before Maya spoke again. "I want to stay, Lyra. Help you prepare. There are others in the pack who would follow you too, if they knew the truth." "It's too dangerous," Lyra protested. "Lyra, you have family in Moonstone, a family that stands by while their alpha discards his true mate for power and ambition." Maya's eyes flashed with determination. "You were always kind to us, even as Luna. You treated the lowest-ranked wolves with respect. Kale has grown cruel since taking Samantha as his new mate. The pack suffers." Lyra studied her friend's face, seeing the sincerity there. Having help would make her preparation easier, and having an ally within Moonstone Pack could prove invaluable. "You can stay until the new moon," she decided. "Then you must return to gather information and to ensure no one suspects what's coming." Maya nodded eagerly. "What do we do first?" "Me." "First," Lyra said, retrieving a weathered journal bound in red leather, "we prepare the sacred space for the awakening ritual." The days passed in a blur of activity. Together, Lyra and Maya cleared the circular gathering space at the center of the settlement, rebuilding the stone altar that had once stood at its heart. They gathered herbs that grew wild in the valley, wolfsbane for strength, moonflower for clarity, bloodroot for awakening the dormant alpha. During the evenings, Maya would shift into her wolf form, a sleek gray creature with gentle eyes, and run the territory with Lyra, helping to strengthen the boundary markings and alert any wandering wolves that Crimson Valley was claimed once more. Lyra had not shifted since the divorce. The awakening ritual required her to remain in human form until the full moon, allowing her alpha wolf to gather strength. But she could feel her other half growing more powerful each day, its presence a constant pressure beneath her skin. "Tell me about Samantha," Lyra said one night, as they sat by the fire. 14 days remained until the full moon. Maya hesitated. "She's not what we expected. Not just a human Kyle became infatuated with. She knows things about wolfkind that no human should know. And there's something about her scent that isn't quite right." "What do you mean?" "It shifts," Maya explained, frowning. "Sometimes she smells human, but other times there's something else beneath it. Something ancient and cold." Lyra's fingers tightened around her cup. "Does Kale sense this? If he does, he's blinded by the child she carries." Maya leaned forward, voice dropping though no one else was present to hear. "The elders are concerned. A half-human child growing at an accelerated rate, a mother whose life force diminishes daily, and strange occurrences throughout the territory. Dead animals found with no marks. Pack members experiencing nightmares of a red-eyed woman calling their names." A prickle of unease crawled up Lyra's spine. "When did these things begin?" "After your divorce," Maya whispered. "The very night you left." Lyra rose, moving to a trunk where she kept the oldest of her grandmother's journals. She returned with a book bound in black leather, its pages yellowed with age. "My grandmother wrote of a prophecy concerning the Crimson Fang bloodline and a threat that would rise when the last Alpha awakened." She flipped through the pages until finding what she sought, then read aloud. "When the blood moon severs what true mates have bound, darkness will seize the moment to enter the world of light. The last daughter of Arya must reclaim her throne before the child of shadow draws its first breath, or all packs will fall to eternal night." Maya's face paled. "You think Samantha is this darkness?" "I don't know," Lyra admitted, "but the timing aligns too perfectly to ignore. The blood moon divorce, her unusual pregnancy, these disturbances in Moonstone territory. What can we do?" Maya asked. Lyra closed the journal with determined finality. "We accelerate our preparations. I was planning to awaken my alpha, reclaim my territory, and challenge Kale after establishing my power. But if this prophecy speaks true, we don't have the luxury of time." The next morning, as dawn broke over Crimson Valley, Lyra led Maya to a hidden cave behind a waterfall at the valley's edge. Inside, illuminated by shafts of light from cracks in the ceiling, stood a stone basin carved with ancient symbols. "The blood pool," Lyra explained, running her fingers along the weathered rim. "Every alpha of the Crimson Fang line has awakened their true nature here. The basin must be filled with water from the sacred spring, mixed with the blood of the awakening alpha, and blessed under moonlight." "How will we fill it?" Maya asked, noting the basin's considerable size. Lyra smiled. "That's why I needed your help. For 3 days, they carried water from the spring deep within the mountain, filling the ancient basin drop by drop. The work was exhausting, especially as the water had to be gathered only at sunrise and sunset when the spring's power was at its peak. On the 4th day, as they made their final trip at sunset, Maya suddenly froze, her nose lifting to the wind. "Someone's coming. A wolf, but not one I recognize." Lyra tensed, reaching for the knife at her belt. They had been careful to cover their tracks beyond Crimson Valley, but it seemed someone had followed them regardless. A twig snapped in the underbrush, and both women turned toward the sound. A moment later, an elderly man emerged from the trees, leaning heavily on a gnarled staff. Despite his aged appearance, Lyra could sense the wolf within him, old, but still powerful. "So," the man said, his voice rasping like autumn leaves, "Ilara's granddaughter has returned to awaken the Crimson Fang." Lyra stepped protectively in front of Maya. "Who are you, and how do you know of my grandmother?" The old man's weathered face creased in a smile. "I am Thaddeus, once beta to your grandmother, when the Crimson Fang Pack still ran these forests. I've been waiting for your return since the night the blood moon shone over Moonstone territory." "Why should I trust you?" Lyra demanded, though something about the old wolf's scent seemed familiar, like a forgotten memory from childhood. Thaddeus reached into his worn coat and withdrew a pendant identical to the one Lyra wore, a silver wolf with ruby eyes. "Because I swore an oath to Ilara that I would protect her bloodline until the last alpha rose again." He held out the pendant. "And because I bring you the final piece needed for your awakening." Lyra approached cautiously, taking the pendant. Unlike hers, which was cool to the touch, this one pulsed with warmth. It contains a drop of your grandmother's blood, Thaddeus explained. The awakening ritual requires the blood of the previous alpha to succeed. Alara preserved it for you, knowing this day would come. Tears pricked at Lyra's eyes as she closed her fingers around the pendant. You've been waiting all this time? The old wolf nodded, living at the edge of these territories, watching over the valley, ensuring none claimed it before you were ready. His expression grew serious. But we must hurry. I've heard the whispers from Moonstone Pack. The human woman's child will be born under the same full moon that should witness your awakening. Is she what the prophecy warns of? Maya asked. The darkness entering the world of light? I believe so, Thaddeus confirmed grimly. She came from nowhere, with knowledge no human should possess, and ensnared an alpha who already had a true mate. These are not coincidences. Lyra straightened. Decision made. Then we complete the preparations tonight. I'll perform the awakening ritual tomorrow at moonrise, 7 days earlier than planned. Thaddeus's bushy eyebrows rose in alarm. That's dangerous, child. Your body might not be ready to handle the full power of the alpha yet. We don't have the luxury of waiting, Lyra countered. If the prophecy is true, every day brings us closer to disaster. That night, as clouds gathered above Crimson Valley threatening rain, the 3 wolves completed the preparations for Lyra's awakening. The blood pool was filled, sacred herbs were burned around its perimeter, and ancient words were inscribed in ash along the cave floor. As Lyra prepared for sleep, knowing she would need her strength for the coming ritual, Maya approached with troubled eyes. I should return to Moonstone, she said. If the child truly comes with the full moon, we need someone there to watch and warn you. Lyra embraced her friend tightly. Be careful. If Kale suspects, he won't, Maya assured her. I'll say I've been mourning your departure, seeking solitude in the eastern woods. The pack knows of our friendship. They'll believe it. After Maya's departure, Lyra sat with Thaddeus by the fire in the Alpha house. The old wolf shared stories of her grandmother, of Alara's wisdom and strength, of how she had foreseen the rise of male-dominated packs and the suppression of female alphas. She knew the balance would need to be restored someday, Thaddeus said, staring into the flames. That's why she protected your mother, and then you, hiding your true nature until the time was right. And if I fail? Lyra asked softly. If I'm not strong enough for this awakening? Thaddeus reached across the space between them, his gnarled hand covering hers. You are Alara's blood. The strength of the Crimson Fang flows in your veins. You will not fail. As Lyra finally drifted to sleep that night, her dreams were filled with running wolves, a great pack that followed a crimson-furred alpha with eyes that burned like molten gold. In the dream, she stood on a cliff overlooking Moonstone territory, and below her, Kale knelt in submission, the pack behind him doing the same. But beyond them, in the shadows of the forest, something watched with eyes of blood red, patient and ancient, waiting for the moment to strike. Lyra woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. Outside, thunder rumbled as storm clouds gathered. 9 days remained until the full moon, but Lyra knew with bone-deep certainty that they could not wait. Whatever darkness Samantha harbored was growing stronger with each passing day. Tonight, she whispered to her wolf, feeling it stir in anticipation. Tonight we become what we were always meant to be. As the day progressed, the storm drew closer, electricity charging the air. By evening, when Lyra and Thaddeus made their way to the hidden cave, lightning split the sky and thunder shook the mountains. A powerful omen, Thaddeus murmured, helping Lyra prepare the final elements of the ritual. The sky itself acknowledges your awakening. Standing before the blood pool in a simple white shift, Lyra removed her pendant, and the one Thaddeus had brought, placing both into the water. The liquid instantly turned a deep, vibrant red that glowed with an inner light. Next, she pricked her palm with a ceremonial dagger, allowing 7 drops of blood to fall into the basin. Blood of my blood, she intoned, the ancient words coming to her, as if she had known them all her life. Power of my line. I, Lyra Thorne, last daughter of Arya, claim my birthright under this moon's light. Let what was hidden be revealed. Let what was subdued rise in glory. As the final words left her lips, lightning struck nearby, illuminating the cave in brilliant white light. The blood pool began to bubble and steam, its glow intensifying until it painted the cave walls crimson. "Now," Thaddeus urged. "Step into the pool and submerge completely. When you emerge, you will be reborn as Alpha." Lyra removed her shift and stepped naked into the warm, glowing liquid. It embraced her like a mother's arms, familiar and comforting despite its strangeness. Taking a deep breath, she allowed herself to sink beneath the surface. The world disappeared in a haze of red. Within the pool, Lyra felt her body changing, bones shifting, muscles strengthening, her very DNA rewriting itself as the protection spell dissolved completely. Her wolf surged forward, no longer submissive but powerful and demanding union. In that moment of transformation, suspended between human and wolf, between Omega and Alpha, Lyra saw visions. Her grandmother standing proud before a full pack, her mother fleeing with an infant Lyra in her arms, Kyle as he had been when they first met, young and idealistic before ambition corrupted him, and finally, a shadowy figure with a woman's shape but eyes that burned with ancient malice. Samantha, or whatever wore Samantha's form, stared back at Lyra through the vision, its gaze penetrating the distance between them. Its lips moved, forming words Lyra couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Too late, daughter of Arya. The child comes tonight." Gasping, Lyra broke the surface of the blood pool. The cave spun around her as new power coursed through her veins, her senses sharpening beyond anything she had experienced before. She could hear Thaddeus's heartbeat, smell the coming rain, feel the vibrations of distant thunder through the stone beneath her feet. "Lyra?" Thaddeus approached cautiously, offering a blanket to cover her. "How do you feel?" She rose from the pool, water streaming from her transformed body. Where once she had been slender, now corded muscle defined her limbs. Her hands ended in slightly elongated fingers, nails thickened into claw-like points. And when she spoke, her voice carried the unmistakable resonance of an alpha. "The child comes tonight," she said, golden eyes blazing in the dim cave. "We must reach Moonstone territory before it's born." Outside, the storm broke in earnest, rain lashing the valley as Lyra and Thaddeus raced back to the Alpha house. There was no time to fully adjust to her new powers, or to complete the traditional week of solitude following an Alpha's awakening. "It's dangerous," Thaddeus warned as Lyra dressed in the clothes she had prepared. Leather pants, a fitted tunic, and her grandmother's ceremonial cloak. "Your body is still adapting to the change. Challenging Kale now could be fatal." "Not challenging him would doom us all," Lyra countered, fastening the cloak with her grandmother's pendant. "You heard the prophecy. If that child draws breath before I reclaim my throne, darkness falls upon all packs." Before Thaddeus could argue further, the sound of running footsteps approached the Alpha house. Seconds later, Maya burst through the door, soaked from the rain and gasping for breath. "Lyra," she panted, eyes widening as she took in her friend's transformed appearance. "It's happening." "Samantha, she's in labor, but something's wrong. The pack healer says it's no natural birth. The pack house is filled with shadows that move on their own, and Samantha's eyes, they're red. Lyra, blood red." Lyra's newly awakened wolf surged to the surface, a growl rumbling from her throat. "Then we go now. Tonight, the Crimson Fang returns to power, and whatever darkness has infected Moonstone Pack will face its reckoning." As they prepared to depart, Lyra paused at the threshold of her grandmother's house, gazing back at what she had reclaimed. In just 20 days, she had transformed from a discarded Omega to a true Alpha, ready to fight for not just her dignity, but the safety of all wolf kind. "I will return," she promised the ancient walls, "and when I do, it will be with a pack to fill these halls once more." With that vow, Lyra Thorne, last daughter of the Crimson Fang legacy and newly awakened Alpha, stepped into the storm, her golden eyes fixed on the distant territory where her former mate now faced a darkness he could not comprehend. The night of reckoning had arrived. Lightning split the sky as Lyra ran through the forest, her newly awakened alpha power surging with each stride. Maya and Thaddeus struggled to keep pace, their wolves no match for the primal energy that propelled Lyra forward. The storm seemed to follow them, or perhaps it followed her, nature itself responding to the rebirth of the Crimson Fang Alpha. "Slow down," Thaddeus called, his aged wolf form laboring over the rough terrain. "Your power is still unstable. You need to conserve strength for what's ahead." Reluctantly, Lyra moderated her pace. The old wolf was right. She could feel her new abilities fluctuating, sometimes overwhelming her senses before receding like a tide. The early awakening had consequences. Her transformation was incomplete, her control tenuous. But waiting had not been an option. Every instinct told her that the child being born in Moonstone territory carried something ancient and malevolent. "How much farther?" she asked, as they paused at a stream to drink. Maya, her gray wolf form sleek in the rain, shifted back to human form momentarily. "We're approaching the border. The pack house is another 3 miles beyond that. The storm is centered there. Worse than what we're experiencing." Lyra nodded, gazing toward Moonstone territory. Even from this distance, she could sense the wrongness emanating from her former home, a cold, slithering energy that made her wolf bristle. "What exactly did you see before you left, Maya?" she asked, needing to understand what awaited them. Maya shivered, pulling her cloak tighter, shadows moving against the walls, crawling across the floor toward Samantha's room, pack members collapsing as they passed through them. "And Samantha," she hesitated. Her belly was glowing from within, a pulsing red light. When she screamed, it wasn't a human sound. "And Kale?" Frantic, desperate. The pack healer tried to evacuate the pack house, saying something unnatural was happening, but Kyle ordered everyone to stay. He believes Samantha is simply having a difficult birth because she's human. Thaddeus, who had remained in wolf form, growled softly, a sound of warning and urgency. "We need to keep moving," Lyra agreed, sensing his concern. "Whatever is happening will reach its culmination soon." They continued their journey, the forest growing darker and more oppressive as they neared Moonstone territory. Trees twisted in unnatural shapes, their branches seeming to reach for the wolves as they passed. The ground beneath their feet felt wrong, too soft in places, as if something moved beneath the earth. "The boundary is just ahead," Maya whispered unnecessarily. All 3 wolves could feel the territorial markers of Moonstone Pack. Lyra paused at the invisible line that had, until 20 days ago, been her home. Crossing it now would announce her presence to any wolf in the territory, especially to Kale, who would recognize her scent despite the changes in her. "I'll go first," she decided. "My alpha status may confuse the boundary recognition enough to give us a head start before Kel realizes who's entered his territory." Without waiting for their agreement, Lyra stepped across the boundary, her head held high. The territorial magic washed over her, recognizing her as both former pack member and foreign alpha, a contradiction that caused the magic to sputter and pulse erratically. It worked. Maya breathed as she and Thaddeus joined Lyra. The alarm hasn't sounded, but Lyra wasn't listening. Her attention had fixed on the pack house visible through the trees, situated on the hill, where it commanded a view of the territory. Even from this distance, she could see that something was terribly wrong. The windows glowed with an unnatural red light, and dark shapes swirled around the building like smoke. A scream pierced the night, high, inhuman, and filled with a terrible triumph. "We're too late," Thaddeus whispered, his wolf eyes wide with horror. "No." Lyra surged forward, alpha power flaring around her like a crimson aura. "We can still stop this." They raced toward the pack house, abandoning stealth for speed. As they drew closer, pack members emerged from surrounding cottages, drawn by the commotion and the presence of intruders. Their confused faces turned to shock as they recognized Lyra, transformed but unmistakable. "Luna?" someone gasped, using her former title. "It's Lyra," another corrected, backing away fearfully. "But she's different." Lyra didn't slow to address them. "Get to safety," she commanded, her alpha voice compelling immediate obedience. "Something dark has entered your pack house. Protect your families." The Moonstone wolves hesitated, caught between her command and their loyalty to Kale. But another scream from the pack house, followed by the sound of breaking glass and splintering wood, decided them. They scattered, gathering children and elders, retreating to the safety of the forest's edge. At the pack house steps, Lyra finally paused, assessing the situation. The ornate wooden doors had been blown outward, as if by an explosion. Within the entrance hall, darkness writhed like living smoke, occasionally solidifying into clawed shapes before dissolving again. "What is that?" Maya whispered, pressing close to Lyra's side. "Shadow spirits," Thaddeus answered grimly. "Ancient entities that feed on pain and fear. They've been summoned by whatever possessed Samantha." Lyra's enhanced senses detected Kale's scent among the chaos. Fear, desperation, and blood. "He's still alive," she murmured. "Upstairs, in the birthing chamber." "How do we get past those things?" Maya asked, eyeing the shadow spirits. Lyra reached for the pendant at her throat, her grandmother's ruby-eyed wolf. It pulsed with warmth against her skin, responding to her awakened power. "The Crimson Fang Alphas were not just leaders," she said, remembering passages from her grandmother's journals. "We were guardians against the darkness between worlds." She removed the pendant, holding it before her. Concentrating her newfound alpha energy, she channeled it into the ancient artifact. The ruby eyes began to glow, then blazed with inner fire, casting crimson light that pushed back the shadows. "Stay close to me," Lyra ordered. "The pendant will protect us, but its power has limits." Together, the three wolves entered the pack house. The shadow spirits recoiled from the pendant's light, hissing and writhing in protest. Furniture lay scattered and broken throughout the entrance hall. Blood stained the walls. Not all of it human or wolf. Some pack members didn't escape, Maya whispered, pointing to a body crumpled in the corner. One of the younger wolves who had served as Kale's guard. Lyra swallowed her grief. There would be time for mourning later, if they survived. They ascended the stairs, following Kale's scent and the increasing concentration of shadow spirits. The second floor was worse than the first. Darkness so thick it was like wading through tar, even with the pendant's protection. Cold seeped into their bones, and whispers filled their minds. Temptations, fears, regrets. "Don't listen," Thaddeus warned. "The shadows will use your weaknesses against you." At the end of the hall stood the birthing chamber, once Lyra's bedroom, when she had been Luna. The door was intact, but covered in strange symbols that glowed with sickly green light. "Protection runes," Thaddeus observed. "But not for our protection. To keep us out." Lyra studied the symbols, recognizing elements from her grandmother's teachings. "These are corrupted versions of ancient wolf magic. Whoever Samantha really is, she knows the old ways." She pressed her hand to the door, channeling her alpha power. The runes flared brightly, resisting her, but the Crimson Fang blood in her veins gave her an advantage. One by one, the symbols began to fade. "Lyra, behind us!" Maya cried suddenly. Turning, Lyra saw shadow spirits converging from both ends of the hallway, forming a barrier that cut off their retreat. Unlike the mindless shapes below, these had purpose and faces, twisted parodies of wolves caught in eternal anguish. "Keep working on the door," Thaddeus urged, positioning himself between Lyra and the approaching shadows. "Maya and I will hold them off." Lyra wanted to protest. The old wolf and her friend were no match for these entities, but the door was yielding to her efforts. A few more seconds and they would have access to the birthing chamber. Behind her, she heard growls and the sound of combat as Thaddeus and Maya faced the shadows. The pendant's light extended around them, offering some protection, but it wouldn't last forever. With a final surge of power, Lyra broke through the magical barrier. The door swung open, revealing the scene within. The birthing chamber had been transformed. The familiar furniture was gone, replaced by an altar-like structure where Samantha lay. The human woman's body was contorted in the final stages of labor, but her eyes, fixed on Lyra the moment she entered, burned blood red, inhuman, and ancient. Kale knelt beside the altar, his strong hands gripping Samantha's, his face a mask of fear and confusion. Blood stained his clothing, and cuts marred his face and arms, evidence of a struggle against forces he couldn't comprehend. "Lyra?" His voice broke with disbelief as he saw her. "What? How are you?" "Step away from her, Kale," Lyra commanded, her alpha voice ringing with authority. "That's not just your human mate giving birth." Samantha's lips curved in a smile that held no warmth or humanity. When she spoke, the voice that emerged was layered with multiple tones, as if many entities spoke through her. "The last daughter of Arya," it hissed. "You're too late, little Alpha. My child already draws breath in this world." As if in confirmation, a thin, wailing cry rose from between Samantha's legs. Kale's eyes widened with paternal instinct, and he moved to see his offspring. "Don't." Lyra lunged forward, but shadow tendrils erupted from Samantha's body, wrapping around Kale and flinging him against the wall with supernatural strength. Lyra raised the pendant, its light forcing the shadows back momentarily. In that brief reprieve, she saw what lay on the bed, still connected to Samantha by a pulsing umbilical cord that glowed with the same sickly light as the runes. It had the general shape of a human infant, but was covered in iridescent black scales rather than skin. Its eyes, open from birth, gleamed red like its mother's. Tiny claws tipped its fingers and toes, and when it cried again, needle-sharp teeth flashed in its mouth. "What have you done?" Lyra whispered, horror and pity warring within her. Samantha, or the entity possessing her, laughed. "I have ensured the survival of my kind. For centuries, we have waited in the shadows, feeding on the scraps of fear and pain we could gather. But now, through this child born of alpha blood and shadow essence, we will have a permanent gateway into your world." Cale struggled to his feet, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "Samantha, what are you saying?" "Our child is not yours," Lyra cut in, understanding dawning. "Not truly. She used you, Cale, used your desire for an heir, your ambition. The entity needed alpha bloodline for its plan, but it couldn't possess an alpha directly, so it found a convenient human," Thaddeus added from the doorway, where he and Maya still fought to keep the shadow spirits at bay, "and manipulated events to place her in an alpha's bed." Cale's face transformed with rage and betrayal. "You used me? Our child is some kind of monster?" Samantha's body convulsed, her spine arching unnaturally as more shadow essence poured from her form. "The child is the future, the first of a new race that will rule wolves and humans alike, and you, Alpha, have served your purpose." Shadow tendrils lashed out again, this time aiming for Cale's throat. Lyra moved without thinking, placing herself between Cale and the attack. The tendrils struck her instead, cold fire searing her flesh where they touched. She cried out in pain but held her ground, the pendant's light flaring in response to her distress. "Lyra!" Cale caught her as she staggered backward from the impact. His arms, once so familiar, steadied her with surprising gentleness. "Why would you protect me after what I did to you?" "Because that's what alphas do," she replied, straightening despite the pain. "We protect, even those who don't deserve it." Something shifted in Cale's expression. Recognition, perhaps, of what he had discarded, of what had always been within Lyra, hidden beneath the spell that had masked her true nature. "You're an alpha," he whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. "You always were. The last of the Crimson Fang line," she confirmed, turning back to face the threat. "And guardian against exactly this kind of darkness." On the altar, Samantha's body was changing, her human form dissolving as the entity within her fully emerged. The shadow essence poured from her like smoke, coalescing into a towering figure with Samantha's face, but a body composed of writhing darkness. The infant, if it could be called that, levitated from the bed, cradled in tendrils of shadow. "I am Morvath," the entity announced, its voice echoing with ancient power. "Last of the Shadow Lords, exiled when your ancestor Arya first united the wolf packs. For centuries, I have waited for the Crimson Fang line to weaken, for the moment when the last alpha would be vulnerable." "The Blood Moon divorce," Lyra realized. "You orchestrated all of this. A simple matter of whispering in the right ears, planting seeds of ambition in a susceptible alpha." Morvath's gaze shifted to Cale, who flinched under its contempt. "Humans are easily possessed, but wolves require consent. Your rejection of your true mate created the perfect opportunity." Lyra's mind raced, searching her grandmother's teachings for anything that might help them fight this ancient evil. The pendant was holding back the shadows, but its power was limited against an entity as powerful as Morvath. "The prophecy," she said suddenly, remembering the words from her grandmother's journal. "The last daughter of Arya must reclaim her throne before the child of shadow draws its first breath. I was too late to prevent the birth, but perhaps there's more to drawing breath than simply being born," Thaddeus finished, understanding her thought. "The child hasn't been fully claimed by the shadow yet," Morvath hissed, clutching the infant closer. "The child is mine. The gateway is opening. Soon my brethren will join me, and your world will be ours." Lyra could feel it, a cold wind blowing from nowhere, carrying whispers of countless entities waiting to cross over. The veil between worlds was thinning, centered on the unnatural child in Morvath's grasp. "Kyle," Lyra said quietly, never taking her eyes from Morvath, "this is your pack, your territory. Despite everything, You're still Alpha here. I need your help. What can I do against that? He asked, gesturing helplessly at the towering shadow entity. Lend me your strength. The Crimson Fang Alpha doesn't rule through dominance alone, but through the willing support of others. If you acknowledge me, you want me to submit to you? Kyle's pride flared briefly before reality reasserted itself. He looked around at the destruction, at the shadow spirits pressing against Thaddeus and Maya's defense, at what remained of Samantha and the monstrous child. If I do this, if I acknowledge you as Alpha, what happens to my pack? They become part of the Crimson Fang pack, Lyra answered honestly. But they survive. We all survive. Cale hesitated only a moment longer before sinking to his knees before Lyra. I, Cale Silverstone, recognize Lyra Thorne as the true Alpha. My strength is yours. The moment the words left his lips, Lyra felt power surge through her, Cale's Alpha energy flowing into her own, amplifying it. The pendant blazed brighter, its crimson light expanding to fill the room. Morvath shrieked in fury and pain as the light touched its shadowy form. No! The child is mine! The gateway is opening! Not anymore, Lyra declared, advancing on the entity. With each step, her power grew, drawing strength not just from Cale, but from every wolf in Moonstone territory, who, sensing the shift in power, instinctively aligned themselves with the stronger Alpha. The pendant in her hand transformed, elongating into a staff of crimson light. Ancient symbols, similar to those that had warded the door but uncorrupted, spiraled along its length. By the blood of Arya, first Alpha of the wolf packs, Lyra intoned, the words coming to her from some ancestral memory. By the power of the Crimson Fang, guardians of the Veil, by the strength of the pack that stands united, I command you, Morvath, last of the Shadow Lords, return to your exile. She thrust the staff forward, its light piercing Morvath's shadowy form. The entity writhed and twisted, its screams shaking the foundations of the pack house. The child! Maya cried. Get the child! Lyra saw the infant still suspended in Morvath's grasp, its tiny form caught between worlds. With her free hand, she reached through the shadow essence, ignoring the burning cold that seared her flesh. Her fingers closed around the infant, pulling it free just as Morvath's form began to collapse. No! The Shadow Lord wailed. My gateway! My child! Not yours, Lyra countered, cradling the infant against her chest. This child belongs to the pack now. With a final, furious howl, Morvath's form imploded, sucked back through the thinning veil between worlds. The shadow spirits throughout the pack house followed, drawn back to their realm by the collapse of their master. Silence fell suddenly, broken only by the soft whimpering of the infant in Lyra's arms. Its red eyes had faded to a more natural blue, and the scales covering its skin were receding, revealing ordinary human flesh beneath. Is it normal now? Kyle asked, approaching cautiously. Not entirely, Lyra admitted, examining the child. It was conceived in shadow and born of it. There will always be something different about him. She looked up at Cale. But he's your son, with your blood. With proper guidance, he can learn to control whatever shadow essence remains within him. Cale reached for the child with trembling hands. Lyra placed the infant in his arms, watching as the former Alpha gazed down at his son with a mixture of fear and wonder. What about Samantha? Maya asked, gesturing to the empty altar where only a pile of ash remained. She was never real, Thaddeus explained gently. Just a vessel Morvath created to carry out its plan. When the entity was banished, there was nothing left to maintain her form. Cale clutched his son closer, grief and guilt warring in his expression. I destroyed our mate bond for nothing, for a lie. He looked up at Lyra, genuine remorse in his eyes. I'm sorry, Lyra. What I did to you was unforgivable. Yes, she agreed, feeling no need to soften the truth. It was, but we move forward now, for the good of the pack. Both packs. Outside, the storm had passed. Dawn light filtered through the shattered windows of the pack house, illuminating the destruction, and the new beginning it represented. Moonstone pack members cautiously approached the pack house, drawn by the shift in power and the sudden absence of the malevolent energy that had consumed their territory. They gathered in the entrance hall, looking up at Lyra with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Lyra descended the stairs to meet them. Kale following with the infant in his arms. Maya and Thaddeus flanked her, a beta and an advisor already taking their places in the new hierarchy. Moonstone Pack, Lyra addressed them, her alpha voice carrying to every ear. A great darkness threatened us all tonight, but together we have overcome it. As the last alpha of the Crimson Fang line, I have reclaimed my birthright and accepted the submission of your former alpha. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but none challenged her words. They had all felt the transfer of power, the rightness of it. From this day forward, our packs are one. The Crimson Moonstone Pack, uniting our strengths and histories. Kale Silverstone will serve as my second, and together we will rebuild what was damaged tonight. She paused, looking at each face in turn. Some of you knew me only as Luna, as an Omega. Now you see me as I truly am. I ask not for your immediate trust, but for your willingness to witness what kind of alpha I will be. One by one, the pack members knelt, acknowledging her leadership. Even Elder Grayson, who had once sneered at her as an Omega, bowed his head in respect. "What of the child?" someone called out. "Is it true what they're saying? That it's part shadow?" Kale stepped forward, his son cradled protectively in his arms. "My son carries a burden none of us would choose, but he is pack, and we protect our own. Under Alpha Lyra's leadership, he will learn to control his shadow essence and use it to protect rather than harm." Lyra placed a hand on the infant's head, feeling the dual nature within him, wolf and shadow, locked in a balance that would require careful nurturing. "This child will be raised as my own, alongside any future children I may have. He will know both his power and his responsibility." The pack accepted this, their instinctive fear of the unknown outweighed by their trust in their new alpha. As the sun rose fully over the territory, Lyra stood with Kale on the packhouse porch, surveying what was now their united domain. "What will you name him?" she asked, watching the infant sleep peacefully in his father's arms, looking now like any newborn except for the faint shimmering beneath his skin when light struck him directly. "Arden," Kale decided after a moment. "It means Valley of the Eagle, a creature of both shadow and light." Lyra nodded her approval. "A fitting name." She turned to face her former mate, now her second. "We have much work ahead of us, Kale. Rebuilding the packhouse, uniting our people, establishing new boundaries, and preparing for whatever may come next." Morvath was banished, not destroyed. "I know," he acknowledged, "and I will serve you loyally, Alpha." He hesitated before adding, "But I wonder, the mate bond we shared, is it truly gone forever?" Lyra considered the question, feeling the empty space within her where their bond had once resided. "The blood moon severed what we had," she said finally. "But bonds can reform, given time and trust. Not as they were, something new perhaps, stronger for having been broken and remade." "I would like that," Kale said softly, "to earn back what I foolishly discarded." "That is a journey that has only just begun," Lyra cautioned, "and one that may take years." As they spoke, Maya approached with news that pack members from Crimson Valley, wolves who had scattered when Lyra's grandmother died, were returning, drawn by the awakening of a new Crimson Fang alpha. The packs were already growing, strengthening. That evening, as wolves from both territories gathered for a feast to celebrate their union and survival, Lyra slipped away to a quiet cliff, overlooking both Moonstone territory and, in the distance, Crimson Valley. In 28 days, the cycle of the moon would complete again. The blood moon had witnessed her divorce and exile. The next full moon had seen her awakening and triumph. Thaddeus found her there, contemplating the future that stretched before them. "Your grandmother would be proud," the old wolf said, settling beside her. "You've restored the Crimson Fang line and reunited the packs, as she always hoped you would." "With help," Lyra acknowledged. "I couldn't have done this alone." "No alpha can," Thaddeus agreed. "That was always the mistake of wolves like Kale, believing that strength meant standing apart rather than drawing power from unity." As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, Lyra felt a deep sense of rightness, of having found the path she was always meant to walk. The Omega who had signed her divorce beneath the blood moon was gone. In her place stood the Alpha who had claimed her pack beneath the light of the next moon. "The pack will need guidance with the child," Thaddeus said after a comfortable silence. "Shadow essence is unpredictable, especially in one so young. We'll face that challenge together." Lyra replied with quiet confidence. "As we'll face whatever else comes our way." She touched the pendant at her throat, no longer a staff of light, but returned to its original form, though it pulsed with new energy, attuned to her awakened power. "The Crimson Fang rises again," she murmured, "not through vengeance, but through mercy." Below, in the valley, wolves began to howl, first one, then another, until dozens of voices lifted in harmony. Moonstone wolves and Crimson Fang refugees, united in acknowledgement of their alpha. Lyra tilted her head back and joined them, her powerful alpha howl rising above the rest, not dominating but harmonizing, creating a new song for a new beginning. The blood moon had witnessed her divorce. The next moon had witnessed her rebirth. And all the moons to come would witness her reign. The queen crowned not by blood alone, but by the choice to protect, rather than destroy, to unite, rather than divide. Lyra Thorne, alpha of the Crimson Moonstone Pack, guardian against the shadows, had come home at last. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.